Oh, I said no about 4 times. I mean, it terrified me. There was no muscle in my body that told me I should play myself.
In 2007, Nicolas Cage went head-to-head with Leonardo DiCaprio and won, not for a movie role, but for a dinosaur skull. At that point, Cage was living like royalty. 2 castles, his own private island, and even a $150,000 pet octopus swimming in his home. But then, everything flipped upside down. His fortune, once worth around $150 million, vanished. To stay afloat, Cage pushed himself harder than ever, starring in 29 straight-to-video films just to keep the collectors at bay. Now, at 61, after years of staying quiet, he's finally opening up about what really went down. And it's wild. Before Nicolas Cage became the symbol of Hollywood's wild rise and painful crash, the red flags were already flashing. The trouble started when he believed his success was untouchable. That overconfidence led to one crucial mistake: trusting the wrong person with everything. He handed full control of his finances to a manager he thought had his back. But behind the scenes, debts were stacking up fast. Risky loans, reckless property deals, and unpaid taxes spiraled out of control. By the time Cage realized what was happening, it was already too late. The empire was crumbling. Those dream homes and grand castles, they turned into money pits overnight. His safe investments sank in value, while the costs of keeping everything running exploded. In the blink of an eye, Cage went from owning kingdoms to fighting just to keep the lights on. He barely had time to breathe, let alone visit the homes he owned, and as his finances started falling apart, so did his reputation. The headlines tore into him, calling him reckless, wild, and irresponsible. People laughed at the headlines, mocked his spending, and joked about his downfall, never realizing the fear hiding behind the scenes. He wasn't living lavishly for fun anymore. He was trying to survive.
I was drinking champagne at 9 years old with my father and eating Kentucky Fried Chicken. So that would be the first time I ate my favorite dish.
He kept pushing forward, taking every role he could just to keep things from collapsing further. But it felt like trying to stop a flood with his bare hands. I felt like I was disappearing, he later admitted, like he was losing pieces of himself faster than he could hold on to them. Before anyone even asked about his childhood or where his story truly began, Nicolas Cage had already lived through a private collapse that almost erased him long before Hollywood ever did. Nicolas Cage, born Nicholas Kim Coppola on January 7th, 1964, in Long Beach, California, came from a family that looked like pure power and privilege from the outside. His father, August Floyd Coppola, was a respected literature professor. His mother, Joy Vogelsang, was a talented dancer and choreographer with German and Polish roots. On his father's side, the lineage was entirely Italian, deeply rooted in Hollywood history. His grandfather, Carmine Coppola, was a celebrated composer. His grandmother, Italia Pannino, was an actress. His uncle, none other than legendary director Francis Ford Coppola. His aunt was Talia Shire, and his cousins included Sofia Coppola, Roman Coppola, and Jason Schwartzman. With a family tree like that, Cage seemed destined for success, creativity, and safety, at least from the outside looking in. But behind the curtain, things were far from picture perfect. His home life was filled with chaos and heartbreak. His mother struggled with schizophrenia and severe depression, and her illness ruled over the family like a storm that never passed. There were days when she'd completely lose her connection to the world, unable to remember her family, her life, or even her son. When Nicholas was just 6 years old, she began being institutionalized. Hospitals became a normal word in his childhood vocabulary. By the time he turned 12, his parents' marriage had fallen apart under the weight of her condition. His mother would disappear for long stretches, taken to psychiatric facilities for treatments that further blurred her memory. One day she'd be home, the next, gone.
I said I can't do that, but I do recall that when I was 12, I could hold my breath for 2 minutes.
There you go.
When I was 12.
No warning, no explanation, just silence. That silence shaped Nicholas. He learned early that showing emotion didn't fix anything. Crying or getting scared didn't bring his mom back or make the house any calmer. So he stopped reacting. Instead, he started studying the world around him, watching every detail. He said later that he observed his mother's episodes the same way someone studies a subject, noticing small changes, spotting warning signs. For him, detachment wasn't a choice. It was survival. He lived in constant fear that his mother might leave again and never return. The quiet that followed her absence felt heavy, the kind of silence that echoes in a child's mind long after the moment passes. Growing up in Long Beach with his father trying to piece together a new normal, Nicholas learned how to live on alert. He paid attention to everything: voices, moods, tones. anything that could hint at trouble. He never fully relaxed, never fully trusted calm. Years later, Cage would reflect on that kind of childhood, describing the children of parents with schizophrenia as super frenetic. He said they become hyper-aware, tightly wound, always on edge, because they're constantly waiting for the next disaster. And that, he admitted, was exactly who he became. He worked too hard, moved too fast, and pushed himself endlessly. Not because he was chasing fame or applause, but because standing still felt dangerous. In interviews, Cage often mentioned Charlie Chaplin, another soul shaped by a parent's breakdown. It comforted him to know he wasn't alone, that others had also grown up reading people's emotions the way others read words on a page. As he got older, that emotional distance he built as a kid turned into a weapon, something powerful he could channel. He began studying human behavior with the same sharp focus he once used to track his mother's episodes. Acting became his release valve, the one place where all that pressure could finally go somewhere. Cinema gave him structure.
No! We're talking tits here! Big tits! Round tits!
A world with rules and meaning. It was the one place where chaos made sense, where every scene had purpose, and every emotion could finally be expressed safely. On camera, he could show what he'd always been forced to hide. That mindset, born from fear and survival, quietly pushed him toward Hollywood before he was even ready for it. But when he finally stepped into that world, it didn't welcome him with open arms. It laughed at him. At just 15 years old, Nicolas landed a tiny role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, playing one of Brad's nameless friends working at a burger joint. He showed up proud, heart pounding, his name printed clearly on the call sheet, Nicolas Coppola. He thought the name might finally open doors instead of closing them. Instead, it made him a target. The moment people saw Coppola, they didn't see a new actor. They saw the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, the director behind Apocalypse Now. From that moment, the teasing began. Crew members started tossing out famous lines from Apocalypse Now, shouting quotes across the set, not as admiration, but as mockery. They'd smirk, nudge each other, and wait to see how he reacted. Nicolas tried to laugh it off, but deep down, it stung. He was just a teenager, surrounded by adults who saw him as a walking last name instead of an actual person. The work hours were limited by law, but the humiliation had no limit. Each time someone shouted a line, it hit him like a punch to the stomach. "I just wanted to act," he later confessed, but it felt like I didn't even belong there. When most of his scenes were cut, that small spark of hope was crushed. It felt like the world had already decided who he was supposed to be, and rejected him for it. One afternoon, he stared into the mirror and made a decision that would change everything. The name Coppola no longer felt like family. It felt like a chain around his neck. So, he broke free. He chose a new name, Nicolas Cage, half inspired by Luke Cage, the comic book hero who stood tall against everything, and half by avant-garde composer John Cage, who made art by breaking all the rules.
Why don't you get out of here?
You make me get out of here.
It was his first true act of rebellion, and it shocked Hollywood. Word spread fast. Producers whispered that he was arrogant for walking away from the Coppola name. Francis Ford Coppola himself felt hurt and disappointed, cutting off future opportunities. Casting directors grew hesitant, afraid that hiring him might upset the powerful Coppola circle. Even parts of the family distanced themselves, leaving Nicolas feeling completely alone. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. He stood taller, spoke deeper, and vowed to rebuild himself from scratch if that's what it took. But life wasn't about to make it easy. By 17, Nicolas Cage felt stuck, trapped between school, family chaos, and the heavy expectations tied to his name. Nothing felt right. School gave him no sense of direction or hope. And home was still a place filled with silence and uncertainty. Pretending everything was fine started to feel impossible. He didn't drop out of school because he had a master plan. He dropped out because staying felt suffocating. All he wanted were movies. That was the one thing that still made sense. But Hollywood didn't reward his leap of faith right away. His scenes in Fast Times at Ridgemont High ended up mostly on the cutting room floor. The one shot he thought might start something? Gone. Suddenly, he was just another broke kid in LA. So he took a job at the Fairfax Cinema, selling popcorn and tickets to strangers watching the very kind of films he dreamed of being in. Every shift was a reminder of what he wanted and how far away it still was. As he tore ticket stubs and handed out change, nobody around him knew that the kid behind the counter was already planning to conquer the world they were paying to watch. He would stand in the dark at the back of the theater, staring up at that glowing screen, asking himself the same question over and over: how do I get from here to there? No answers ever came, just the aching need to survive and escape the life he was stuck in.
Sometimes I made the deals so convoluted, it was hard for me to work out if they were on the level.
Between shifts at the cinema, he delivered pizzas, memorizing street names, doorways, and faces, all while wondering if this was it. Was this what his life was supposed to be? His break didn't arrive in a blaze of glamour. It crept in quietly. He was invited to read lines, not for himself, but to help other actors audition for Rumblefish, a film directed by his uncle. No one handed him a thing. No favors, no family shortcuts. Still, he impressed the team enough to earn a small part on his own merit. A tiny victory that meant the world to him. Then came Valley Girl, a low-budget film shot in just 22 days with only $350,000 to work with. Nobody expected much from it, but it made over $17 million, and suddenly the spotlight found him. Playing Randy, a punk rocker caught in a Romeo and Juliet-style romance, Cage went all in. He shaved his chest hair into a V, screamed until veins bulged in his neck, and gave every ounce of himself to that performance. It wasn't about money. It was about proving he belonged. The director made only $5,000, and Cage didn't walk away rich either. But he walked away with something more powerful, a career. After Valley Girl, Nicolas finally felt momentum. He was no longer the kid with the famous last name. He was an actor earning his place in Hollywood. When he worked on Rumblefish, even though his role was small, he treated it like a test. He transformed everything. His look, his voice, his mannerisms. Nothing was casual. Every glance, every gesture, every breath had purpose. He wanted people to see his hunger, his commitment. Then came the heartbreak. When The Outsiders was being cast, Cage wanted the role of Dallas Winston, the tough rebel who wore pain like armor. Cage understood that pain better than anyone. To prepare, he locked himself in a room for 2 weeks, staring at a photo of Charles Bronson, the iconic action star known for his icy toughness. Cage mimicked Bronson's stillness, his silence, his power, trying to become unshakable.
Punk, and I could see all the wrong he'd ever done, and I turned it all against him.
He wanted to bury that sensitive teenager people once mocked and rise as someone impossible to ignore. But his uncle, Francis Ford Coppola, cast Matt Dillon instead. Dillon was already a rising name, the safe studio favorite. For Cage, that rejection hit hard, not just professionally, but personally. Losing the role meant losing a chance to prove himself to the one person whose approval he'd chased since childhood. The pain ran so deep that he did something few people ever knew. He showed up anyway. He slipped onto the set, appearing as an uncredited extra in a fight scene. No lines, no acknowledgement. He just wanted to be close to the film he'd wanted so badly. The pattern continued. When The Godfather Part 3 was being cast, Cage hoped for another chance, but the role went to Andy Garcia. Cage would later admit that rejection left a wound that never truly healed. Being turned down by Hollywood hurt, but being turned down by family cut deeper. Then came The Cotton Club in 1984. The movie itself was a mess. The budget exploded to nearly $60 million, and the script was rewritten over 30 times. But the real chaos happened off-screen. The project became infamous after producer Roy Radin was found dead under shocking circumstances that led to a massive trial known as the Cotton Club case. At just 20 years old, Cage suddenly found himself surrounded by the darkest, most chaotic parts of Hollywood, a brutal mix of power, danger, and ego. With rejection, chaos, and loss piling on him, Cage started testing the limits of his body and mind. He stopped waiting for permission to prove his worth. He forced his way into greatness. He pushed himself so hard that even his co-workers began to worry. The pain from his childhood, the family tension, the sense of never being chosen, he turned all of it into fuel. He believed that if he could feel real suffering, he could deliver real truth on screen.
I put on Afro-Caribbean paint, like a white and black paint, and black out my eyes, so I look like this sort of Afro-Caribbean voodoo eye.
That belief nearly broke him during Birdie. In 1984, Cage played a wounded Vietnam veteran, scarred both inside and out. To channel that pain, Cage went to disturbing lengths. He pulled out 2 of his own teeth, no anesthesia, believing the real agony would translate on camera. His character returned from war with his jaw wired shut, his face bandaged. Cage didn't just act it, he lived it. He wrapped his head in bandages and refused to take them off for 5 straight weeks. He slept in them, ate in them, even walked the streets like that. His skin couldn't breathe, his vision narrowed, and his face broke out painfully. But he stayed in that discomfort to feel what his character felt. When he finally removed the bandages, his face was raw and scarred. But on film, the emotion was undeniable. Birdie went on to win the Grand Jury Prize at Cannes. For the first time, Cage felt truly seen. All that pain, the childhood trauma, the rejection, the physical torment, suddenly felt like it had led to something real. That moment of recognition hit him like a wave. For once, he allowed himself to feel joy, something rare in his life. It confirmed his belief that suffering for art wasn't pointless. It meant something. And he didn't stop there. In Racing with the Moon, a World War II coming-of-age story, Cage pushed himself again, this time too far. In one emotional scene, he cut himself with a knife to make the emotion look real. The crew froze in shock, but Cage insisted they keep rolling. That was his truth. Real pain for real art. Then came The Boy in Blue in 1986. Cage transformed his body entirely, packing on 30 pounds of muscle and training relentlessly to row like a real 19th century athlete. He pushed until his hands blistered, his body locked, and exhaustion set in. The movie flopped, but Cage's performance earned him a Genie Award nomination. Proof that even when audiences didn't get it, the industry recognized his drive. By the mid-1980s, his fearlessness had turned into something dangerous. His passion was blurring into obsession. Directors admired his commitment, but worried about his extremes. Cage was carrying bruises no one could see, emotional and physical, and he just kept pushing further. When he joined Peggy Sue Got Married, he made one of his boldest and most controversial creative decisions yet. He created a bizarre, high-pitched voice for his character, inspired by Pokey from Gumby, and wore oversized fake teeth. It completely changed how his character spoke and looked. Kathleen Turner, the film's star, was horrified. She felt his performance made scenes almost impossible to play sincerely, and she begged Francis Ford Coppola, her director and Cage's uncle, to stop him. It was another moment that showed just how unpredictable, brilliant, and volatile Nicolas Cage had already become. An artist who would risk everything to be unforgettable. The crew whispered about it nonstop. Producers were furious, but Francis, trying to defend Cage's artistic freedom, allowed it to continue. The result? Chaos. Scenes had to be reshot, the tone felt uneven, and Kathleen Turner was deeply frustrated. The studio complained, and even Francis later admitted he made a mistake by not stepping in sooner. That decision changed everything. It cracked the bond between uncle and nephew permanently. Cage had wanted to prove he was bold and original, but instead he left behind tension, resentment, and confusion. Then came the role that nearly broke his mind, Vampire's Kiss, 1988. He played a delusional literary agent unraveling into madness, and Cage wanted the audience to feel that madness for real. In one of the most shocking moments of his career, he swallowed 3 live cockroaches. For real. The director didn't stop him. In fact, he asked for another take, like he was testing Cage's limits. And Cage didn't have any. Years later, in 2023, Cage admitted he regretted that choice. He called it cruel, unnecessary, and something he would never do again. But at the time, he saw it as total commitment, proof that he'd give everything to a role. It was also the start of what he called his nouveau shamanic acting method, a style built on surrendering completely to the performance, no protection, no filter, no fear. Even in that chaos, though, there were glimpses of grace. In Moonstruck, 1987, Cage showed a softer side. He played a one-handed baker with a broken heart, and his snap-out-of-it line became legendary. The movie won 3 Oscars, and for the first time, Cage felt pure joy. Recognition not for madness, but for emotion. Still, the extremes came roaring back. In Firebirds, 1990, he trained with real Apache helicopter pilots, pushing through wild, high-risk scenes, only for critics to dismiss it as a Top Gun knockoff. Then came Wild at Heart, where he wore his own snakeskin jacket, saying it symbolized his belief in personal freedom. The film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, but its raw violence sent some people running from early screenings. Cage didn't care. He thrived in the heat of that world. He craved intensity. Even Time to Kill, 1989, a little-seen Italian-French war drama filmed in Zimbabwe, proved how far he would go. Isolated and exhausted, he still poured everything into it. But the more his fame grew, the more his personal life started to fracture. The same obsession that fueled his performances began leaking into real life. The line between the man and the character started to blur, and he didn't even notice. He was heading straight toward the addictions and collapses that would bring him to his knees. Honeymoon in Vegas revealed more than audiences realized. His character was a compulsive gambler, and off-screen, Cage was falling into the same trap. Casinos became his escape. He lost not just money, but control. That habit would later return, feeding into the chaos that wrecked his finances. Then came Leaving Las Vegas, 1995, the film that would change his life forever. Cage played a man drinking himself to the edge, and he threw himself into the part with terrifying honesty. He even drank real alcohol on set to capture that unraveling pain. He attended AA meetings, studying how addiction steals a person piece by piece. The performance was raw, haunting, and it earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor. But the win came with a hidden price. His marriage to Patricia Arquette fell apart under the emotional weight of the role. The movie gave him Hollywood's highest honor, but it shattered one of the few stable parts of his life. After that, Hollywood turned him into an action hero. The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, box office smashes that made him a global superstar. But the toll was brutal. He sprinted through gas-filled sets that damaged his eyes, performed dangerous stunts, and worked himself to exhaustion. He believed the audience deserved every ounce of him, even if it broke him. During Con Air, tragedy struck when stuntman Philip Swartz lost his life in an on-set accident. Cage carried that grief with him for years. Another invisible weight in a life already full of them. Then came National Treasure, and with it, a $20 million payday. The movie was a smash hit, but it sparked something dangerous in him. An obsession with rare artifacts and real treasure. He bought everything from dinosaur skulls to haunted mansions. One skull cost him $276,000, outbidding Leonardo DiCaprio, only for him to later learn it had been stolen from Mongolia. He purchased the infamous LaLaurie Mansion in New Orleans, rumored to be haunted, and filled it with exotic items: a $150,000 octopus, 2 albino cobras, a crocodile, a shark. Each new acquisition thrilled him for a moment, but pulled him closer to collapse. When Ghost Rider came along, it looked like the perfect full-circle moment. A blockbuster superhero role, global fame, massive success. But behind the scenes, it was destroying him. Long hours in heavy suits, endless effects work, suffocating heat. Cage was burning out. Then came World Trade Center, 2006. He played real-life NYPD officer John McLaughlin, one of the survivors of the Twin Tower collapse. To honor those who lived through it, Cage pushed himself into dark psychological places. He spent hours in sensory deprivation tanks to understand the fear of being trapped. He read survivor accounts until their words haunted his dreams. Halfway through filming, he began suffering panic attacks. His body trembled, his heart raced, and he couldn't separate himself from the pain of the story. It was ironic. 2 of his greatest achievements came just as his inner world was falling apart. And then came the IRS. $14 million in unpaid taxes, properties seized, accounts drained. He was forced to take every role offered. 29 films between 2010 and 2015, just to keep his head above water. His personal life fell apart in public view. His relationship with Christina Fulton, mother of his son Weston, ended in bitterness. Decades later, in 2025, Fulton sued Cage, claiming he failed to step in during Weston's mental health struggles. The lawsuit reopened old wounds and thrust his family back into the spotlight. His next marriage to Patricia Arquette started with passion, but crumbled under pressure. While he filmed Con Air, she was caring for her sick mother, alone. The distance between them grew, and by 2001, it was over. In 2004, Cage married Alice Kim, a 19-year-old waitress he met in Los Angeles. He was 40. Despite the controversy, he believed this love would last. For 12 years, it did, until rumors and tension tore it apart. In 2011, he was arrested in New Orleans after grabbing her arm during an argument. The marriage ended in 2016. Then came a whirlwind. He married Erica Koika in Las Vegas in 2019. 4 days later, he filed for annulment. The footage was brutal. Cage slurring, saying he didn't want to go through with it. She denied any manipulation, but the damage was done. The headlines were merciless. Through it all, the extravagant lifestyle continued. Castles, cars, exotic pets. To outsiders, it looked like chaos. To Cage, it felt like survival. But even he couldn't deny it anymore. He was spiraling. By the late 2000s, Nicolas Cage was exhausted, humiliated, nearly erased by the same industry he once ruled. But he didn't quit. He sold off mansions, castles, even the island he once called his paradise. Slowly, painfully, he cleared his debts. By 2023, the nightmare was over. The IRS debt paid in full. Then came Pig, 2021. Small, quiet, and nothing like the action blockbusters people expected. But it was magic. Cage played a lonely truffle hunter grieving the only creature that ever loved him without judgment. The film stunned critics, earning 97% on Rotten Tomatoes and won him the Independent Spirit Award. For the first time in decades, the world didn't see a fallen star. They saw an actor again. By 2025, his net worth was back up to around $40 million. He lived quietly between Las Vegas and Malibu. No more exotic animals, no more haunted mansions, just peace. In a recent interview, Cage finally broke down his truth. His voice trembled as he admitted, "I carried so much shame I could barely look people in the eye. I thought my failures made me unlovable." He said he wasn't running from fame. He was running from himself. "I thought losing everything was punishment," he said softly. "Now I understand. It was the only way I could find myself again." If you enjoyed this deep dive into Nicolas Cage's unbelievable journey, the chaos, the pain, and the redemption, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below about your favorite Cage moment. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.